The government clearly won that question time, and they leave these 2 sitting weeks with a spring in the step when the Nats are completely divided. I mean, what's happened here? Are they catching something from the Nats, these Labor MPs?
It's crazy, and for Anthony Albanese, you can understand why he'd be absolutely ropeable, Andrew, given what a terrible week the government, fortnight the government had, and then this basically a full toss bowled by Joel Fitzgibbon and the government. Well, they didn't miss. Have a look.
Mr. President, I'm optimistic about our future because we now know that Senator Farrell is leading the next generation of Labor leaders into supporting more responsible economic policies, and that is a great thing. And courtesy of Channel 10, we now know who the members of this coal industry, coal workers supporting Otis Group are. And indeed, you know, we've got, I mean, Senator Stirl is on there twice. Senator Stirl is on there twice.
Order, order.
Imagine that, a rebel group within Parliament, Mr Speaker. You're just trying to steal my thunder. But Mr Speaker, I was very interested
Members on my left.
The Otis menu, Mr Speaker. Very, very interesting reading. On the menu is ravioli egg yolk, and Mr Speaker, no doubt the leader of that group, the member for Hunter, Mr Speaker, he had that when he went there for dinner because today he's got egg all over his face, Mr Speaker.
They are ably led by the Godfather himself. One of the wines, I understand, Senator Farrell.
Order.
On the wine list, it's a Cabernet, $110 a bottle, colleagues, but we don't hold that against you. We don't hold that against you, Senator Farrell. This is what your, I'd say good friend, but is clearly not, and former colleague has said about you. Given the names associated with this group, I'm not surprised. Not the sharpest tools in the shed. So that was former Senator Doug Cameron cannot help himself. But Senator Farrell, what we say to you, what we say to Senator Stirl, Senator Kitching, Senator Chisholm, Senator Polly, Senator Ciccone, welcome to the world of jobs.
Senator Cash.
And there was a sense of deja vu because I automatically went back, Mr Speaker, to remember the scene from Muriel's wedding where you had Bill Hunter go into the restaurant and he ran into Deirdre Chambers, and imagine his surprise, Mr Speaker. Deirdre Chambers.
So Peter Dutton talking about the fact that a couple of the MPs concerned bumped into the TV cameras of Channel 10 and Peter Van Onselen and saying that it looked like a coincidence. Not so, says Peter Dutton. But the problem is, for Albanese, and it's serious because that was all very entertaining and it was the government on fire. But in terms of McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister had a smile for the first time in 2 weeks because it's a gift from Labor, who's ahead in the polls. Albanese's doing well, and then they've basically just stitched him up about 6 months on from the election.
I mean, that's right. They're ahead in the polls. His approval rating's better than the Prime Minister's, and yet his MPs want to rebel, including on television cameras. Don Farrell couldn't have been clearer. He was saying, we're here to support coal workers. It's a measure of the anger, it seems, of these people at the approach Albanese's taking. Albanese's been keen to be small target and, partly to stop divisions like this. It's a risky strategy in a sense because you end up being accused of not standing for anything. But there's no doubt in Joel Fitzgibbon and others' heads, it seems, that he's just not doing enough. Don Farrell has other motivation. He wanted to be Deputy Senate Leader. He's not. One other thing about this dinner that I was told, Kieran, was that Annika Wells, who's got an inner-city Brisbane seat, as I understand it, was one of those who was invited and went, what the heck is this? Because she doesn't have the same views on coal as some of them. But, you look at the people who weren't invited. They're people like Chalmers and Bowen and Burke. So if it was just a right faction meeting, you'd think they would be invited to Kokomo's. They weren't. And, look, it's a terrible division in the Labor ranks for them.
It is. Having said that, and while it was awkward for them today, it's still, I don't think it's anywhere near the sort of thing we're seeing in the coalition right now, with a National Party MP quitting the party and even talk about the LNP sitting separately to the coalition. I want to play for our viewers a little of what Matt Canavan said to our colleagues Tom Connell and Annalise Nielsen earlier.
Could you rule out ever joining a standalone party?
Look, I'll never rule out anything mainly because I mean ultimately that's my representation here is at least partly and mainly determined by the LNP. I am an LNP senator. I get elected on an LNP ticket. I have a loyalty to the LNP. as a party room. So of course, if the LNP itself in Queensland, which is not me, but if they decided to do something, I'd be in a very difficult position. But I don't believe. No, I'm not seeking to. I wouldn't seek to join, and I don't. I've spoken to the LNP in the last few days. That's not on the cards.
Matt Canavan, of course, based in Rockhampton, a member of the LNP, says he doesn't want to have any shift, but not ruling it out either. So this is very much a possibility, even though there's only one individual at the moment sitting under that banner. But where there's one, more can follow. It's
put to me it's a live issue, basically, yesterday, that you could have an LNP separate party room. Now, Canavan's downplaying it, but he's not ruling it out. And you're quite right, they've had someone quit the Nationals party room, and Michael McCormack's under a lot more threat at the moment than Anthony Albanese. So even though it's a bad end to the week for Labor, you're right, the government's got more to grapple with at the moment. And there's still this feeling about here, it's when, not if, in terms of Michael McCormack being rolled. But so as someone said to me today, that needs a trigger. And despite several attempts this week, there hasn't been that trigger for another spill.
Yeah, good point. And Andrew, the government, as we mentioned, finishing the week on a high.